common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall still with me. Get her thoughts on what our next guest has to say about where we are in the Middle East. We're joined now by Natasha Hausdorff. She's a barrister and is a leader with UK Lawyers for Israel and joins us. Good afternoon to you, Natasha.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. Now, obviously, after these incredible developments, we've seen that Iranian missile attack on Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said, there will be retaliation, there will be revenge. But the US has said, and Joe Biden said very clearly, it would not support any Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. And there's concern about strikes on oil depots and oil production as well. And this, when the former UK Defence Secretary, Sir Ben Wallace, has joined other experts saying, frankly, Britain's armed forces are not up to protecting Israel from Iranian missiles. Where does Israel stand on this now? What would be the legal, in terms of international law, options for them for retaliation?
There's been an ongoing war against Iran, which it has been waging through its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas and the Houthis included. And so the general rules of international law concerning when wars start, I think, are very much engaged. And the principles of the laws of armed conflict in terms of necessity, proportionality, distinction, precaution would apply to any response that Israel lawfully undertakes. But that is ultimately going to be within the parameters that the United States are setting out. And I think in terms of what you've just discussed, we're seeing mixed messaging, certainly over the last few days. The initial response from the Americans in relation to that strike by Iran, over 180 ballistic missiles raining across the entirety of Israel. The initial response we heard from the Americans was that a severe response would be required. That's now quickly been replaced with Biden indicating that the nuclear capabilities that Iran is building up are off the table. Yeah. And unfortunately, that sort of mixed messaging that we've heard over the last 12 months has been of great encouragement, not just to Iran, not just to Hezbollah, but also to Hamas. May also be one of the reasons that we still have over 100 hostages in Gaza. And so it's had a devastating impact on Israel's ability to defend itself lawfully. But those strikes, in relation to the question of the application of international law, so long as they are militarily necessary, they distinguish between civilians and combatants, and they are proportionate, which is a case of weighing up the anticipated military advantage against any expected collateral damage, then they would be lawful. And given the threat, the existential threat that Iran is posing to Israel at the moment, then severe strikes that take out Iran's ability to continue to seek to kill Israeli civilians across the entirety of that country's territory would certainly be lawful.
Well, indeed, and I think weirdly, Israeli being hamstrung not by, let's face it, blatant anti-Israel and anti-Semitism feeling, United Nations and elsewhere, basically anyone in the left of the world in the United Nations, but also by the fact that actually they've got this incredible military defence with the help of US military, this Iron Dome, which has meant that despite this incredible barrage of missiles, both this time and back in April, that we haven't seen, not widespread death and destruction and injury, but actually not a single Israeli death this time round. And I think only one last time round, but somehow then therefore Israel isn't seen as a victim. But there is no other country in the world, if they were faced with missile strikes on that scale from an enemy nation that has vowed to destroy their existence, would ever put up with that and would not retaliate in kind and cause huge destruction. The Americans wouldn't put up with it. No European country would put up with it. We wouldn't put up with it. And yet constantly we see Israel being told to sort of put one arm behind its back in terms of its own ability to defend itself, when you and I both know the world would be a damn sight better place if Iran was not able to develop a nuclear weapon. Pretty much every country in the Middle East would agree with that as well.
Well, if you remember, Julia, after the first enormous escalation by Iran of targeting Israel directly with ballistic missiles, with rockets and with drones in April, it was told by America to take the win. And what the Americans meant on that is because of the international coalition, including the US and the RAF, the United Kingdom, to take out a great number of those projectiles that were hurtling towards Israel, and the incredible functioning of Israel's domestic missile defense system. That's something that I actually haven't seen discussed very much. But the interaction between Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow systems is history-making, and certainly something that no one could have predicted. Israel's missile defense systems working so particularly well.
Yeah, certainly the Iranians didn't predict it.
Well, that too, and yet, as a consequence of that successful defense, we've seen a general reluctance by the Americans to allow Israel to respond.
It's like people didn't die, so you don't need to respond. I mean, and Israel were their response was very tactically calculated and very small after April. And again, in a way that in no way would the Americans have responded to an attack like that, or the British in the same way. But what are the options? Because there is a feeling now that Israel is looking at, here we are. We've managed to take out large amounts of Hamas and Hezbollah. We saw, another Hamas commander revealed that died 3 months ago by the IDF today. They've clearly infiltrated the Iranian hierarchy at a high level as well. They clearly have incredible amounts of information about what is going on in that country and about the military installations. Now is the time for them to take out their sworn enemy. For once and for all. People are talking about that being a dangerous escalation, but hasn't the escalation already happened?
I see it certainly as the inverse, the escalation that no one, again, seems to be talking about, that has meant that 60,000 plus Israelis haven't been able to return to their homes for a year now in the north because of incessant fire by Hezbollah onto sovereign Israeli territory. That is an unacceptable position, as you say. No democratic state would be expected to put up with it. Interestingly enough, though, I don't think Israel is just now waging this war on its own behalf. If it is successful, it will be freeing the people of Lebanon from the subjugation of Hezbollah. If it is successful, it will be freeing the people of Iran from the oppressive, brutal Islamic regime there. And I think one of the reasons that Israel has, by all accounts, been able to be so successful in penetrating, intelligence-wise, these regimes is because of the cooperation, coordination of so many individuals, Lebanese, Iranians themselves. They want to see a free Middle East. They want to see the end of this brutal occupation by these Islamist terrorist organizations. And we saw glimpses of that under the last administration in the US with the Abraham Accords. We saw Iran very much on the back foot, that they've been able to build up their arsenal, their weapons, their military proxies around the region to threaten not just Israel, but Western interests in the Middle East and Western interests at home. Western civilization as a whole is a damning indictment, unfortunately, of where things have moved over the last few years. But with the coordination and cooperation of those on the ground in these countries that want to see freedom, then I think there is every opportunity to be optimistic as long as America gets on board and certainly doesn't stand in the way of Israel being able to defend itself.
Yes. There is no point in allies saying Israel has a right to defend itself and then basically insisting on tying their hands, saying, oh, but not that. Natasha Hausdorff, thank you so much for joining. She's a barrister. She's with the UK Lawyers for Israel. Thank you for that perspective.